it feels almost like National Treasure.
I think he describes it as a quest, like an adventure.
Now that vision of what he saw, which was...
It looks like the Garden of Eden. It looks like the tree of knowledge, and there's a serpent on the vine right next to this bunch of grapes. Is this forbidden knowledge? Is there a penalty for getting it or for trying to get to it? Is this something that they should have? Today, Mark and I are talking about the thrilling wine-based drama on Apple TV, Drops of God, Season 2, Episode 1, The Present.
So spoilers are ahead.
We're getting into our initial thoughts of the show.
We are talking about the mysterious present left by Alexander Leisure.
Jumping back into Camille and how she's still living in the shadows of her father.
And finishing off with Issei, his journey, and the visions that he's having.
Quick thank you to our channel members for supporting us so we can continue making these videos. Now, let's get into the episode. Let's jump right in with the beginning. And what are your overall thoughts coming into this show?
Well, I'm excited because...
I'm excited too!
I do feel like the first season wrapped up very nicely. I wasn't sure how they could continue this story, if they were going to lean more into what the manga does, or I had no idea. And
they made a lot of big changes from the manga, so I didn't know how much they could continue on with that source material.
Right. So I was a little concerned that they might just be just kind of milking the property. But I think the way that they set up the next piece of this, first off, feels true to form of what the show is and has me excited about the dynamics of what's going on. Overall, I thought this was a strong start to the season. It, picks right back up where we left characters. And yes, it was nice to see characters what had happened in the few, maybe a year since.
I think a little bit longer than that. I think at least 3 years. I think that they did show that there was some passage of time, right? Because obviously that winery didn't get built up overnight, all those changes. So right. I do think there was some passage of time.
I wasn't sure how much passage time, but at least, some time has passed. I'm sure that there is more built relationship between Camille and Issei that, we'll get to and we'll see fully fleshed out throughout the season. I am more excited about seeing their dynamic, where before they were very much rivals. It is going to be interesting to see them kind of tackle this new puzzle with each other. So I am excited for that.
I do think some of that rivalry is going to come back, though, because there is some friction going on. And I think that Alexander is great at amplifying that friction.
Yes.
So I do think that some of that will come back, but they at least are starting off as kind of on each other's side. For me, it took me a minute to calibrate, because I think the last season kind of wrapped everything up with a perfect little bow on top, and it felt like the story is all good and done. And I actually kind of felt like it was a happy ending for everybody that we cared about, Alexander didn't get his happy ending and Luca didn't get his happy ending, but really, who cares about those guys? So I'm fine with the fact that they didn't get their perfect ending. And so I was a little surprised to see where Issei is at. And that kind of caught me a little bit off guard. Also, I love Issei. So for him to go from somebody who so strongly knew what he was doing with his life to where he is, and we're going to kind of get to that, it was a little bit tough, but also it did make sense. It's just I didn't think that that's where he was going. And Talion at the end of so that's the French lawyer. At the end of the last season, he had a discussion with Thomas's dad, Philippe Chassangre, and Talion basically ended up saying that these inheritances never end well, and it always messes up the loser. And I think that we saw that, like I thought that gesture of goodwill of giving Issei half the wine was enough, but I can totally see how that made the two of them closer, but that didn't validate Issei's feelings. And so I can understand how he got to this kind of dark place that he got to. It just surprised me a little bit. I'm very excited about what it set up.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that it started a little bit slower than the first episode, because like the first episode had this perfect pivotal moment to drop us into that just kind of like cranks everything up to 11. And this one, I think, had a little bit to unpack, as far as like catching us up to Camille and what she's been doing with Tomas, and catching us up to Issei, and starting to build the situation of what's going on. So I feel like this one had a little bit more work to do,
mm-hmm.
but I still thought it was very good.
Yeah.
And I do think that was a smart move of having that like opening scene was definitely something that definitely kind of grabs your attention.
Yeah. No, and I definitely agree with a little bit slower, taking its time a little bit. We, like you mentioned, the death of Alexander Leisure was like the catalyst for this whole story. Though what I am really excited about with what we are seeing is that in the previous season, it was very much like Camille was the protagonist. She was kind of thrown into this thing of like, this is her struggle of how she's going to have to prove to her estranged father that she is worthy of this wine. And it does seem she will have some character growth in this. Like, she is definitely in the shadow of Alexander Leisure, right, that I think we'll see her grow into. But it does seem like this season is going to focus on Issei's struggles. And I think that the last season showed that he was in charge of wine. Like, he knew wine. He could come in and get a blind test and be able to tell exactly which wine vineyard from, even if it was like one of the most difficult ones to know. He was so good at it. And now this season feels like he's lost that. And so now he's the underdog in a way. And now he has to struggle to figure out what makes sense to him. And, originally the test that Alexander Leisure gave in the first season, it seemed like it was a struggle for Camille. And now this test, Camille is uninterested, and Issei is very much like, I have to figure this out. Like, this is my purpose. And I like some of the dichotomy that we see of like why he's struggling with it so much. Yeah. And, we'll definitely get into that. But I'm excited to see where the season goes with him being the more central focus. And
I feel like what we've seen with just one episode so far has shown us that they understood what we liked from the first one, and they're giving us some of that, and they're giving us more in some areas. But then they're also taking the same formula, but kind of flipping it on its head. So for instance, I think that we already got in this one episode more locations than we got in the first episode of, Drops of God season 1. So it's like, do you like all of the beautiful locations? Do you like the multicultural aspect of it? We've got that. This is going to be even bigger. This is going to cover more countries, maybe more continents. Who knows?
I definitely felt that way with the little bit of Spanish that occurred, and I was like, "Oh man, just give me more! I love all the cultures. I want it all."
Right. So they're definitely saying right from the bat, "Hey, if you love that, we're definitely going to give you more of that." The formula in the beginning of the test, that was very structured, versus this one. It's interesting because I think he describes it as a quest, which is, I think, similar to a test in that, like, you have a goal that you're trying to get, and it's tough, and it involves a lot of, hard work, studying, detective work, whatever. But it's different enough that I don't think that this is just going to feel like a straight up repetition of last season.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. It does seem that, like, because of the dynamics between Camille and Issei, is that this is going to create a lot of the tension. Like, before the last season, a lot of the tension came from Camille not knowing wine as well and having to really study and you know, put a lot of work into these tests, where this is going to be this kind of, the way I imagine it going is that, you know, I see Issei is like, he had committed his life to one area of study. That was his whole identity. And he gets shown up and loses to somebody who did it in a couple weeks, which is like such a blow to the ego. And so this whole season, I feel like, is, as he's going to find this wine, it's going to be him struggling with that. And then having the added on top of, you know, Camille being as good as she is. And I could see a lot of frustration that comes from that and a lot of friction.
I think her superpower really rocked him, of just, here's somebody who in the span of a handful of weeks or something like that has gotten to the level where she can match me. So if she gets a couple more weeks, does she beat me? Does all of my hard work mean nothing? Am I really second to her? And he didn't even get a fair chance to see if he could beat her or not, because of the way that Alexander set up that final test, you know, where he'd given her the answer as a kid because he wanted her to win all of it. It clearly got in his head. So let's talk about the quest and kind of the unveiling it and your thoughts at that dinner table, and then maybe like them tasting and kind of your ideas of this quest initially.
Well, first off, it's, you know, they're celebrating their birthday, right? And I guess they have a similar birthday. I don't know if I remember that from the first season.
So it wasn't made explicit in the first season. It was just kind of implied because Alexander and his wife are in the hospital with their baby. So I don't know if they were born that day, the day before, but it was like, you know,
relatively
within a short
close
amount of time.
Okay.
And he goes to get a snack from the vending machine or a drink or something like that. And he sees Honoka and Hirokazu leaving the hospital with a baby of their own. So the implication is that they
have
were born at the same time or within, like, you know, a few days of each other. Gotcha.
Okay, that makes more sense. So at first, they only invited people. They don't have friends outside of the people that were in the main one.
Right.
And second, the other person that makes an invite is the lawyer. You know, I just felt like it's fine. I get it. We're setting up the next piece of the journey. But I didn't know if they just like became friends with him. They're like, oh, hey, he set us on this journey that said we'd hate each other at the end, and now he's our friend, so he could come. I get it's to set it up, but that was my first initial thought, was interesting cast of characters to have at this birthday dinner. Yeah. But I love the French lawyer. He's great. The way he, you know, lays down lines, great. And I was very curious about him presenting it. You know, he talks about how I thought about just like not doing it, like not giving this to you. Right. And part of me thinks maybe he should have, you know, he was so gung-ho that these don't end well. Always somebody's going to be upset. And he, you know, he goes forward. And I don't know. I mean, he's legally obligated to do it. And especially because he took the money, you know, if he had an issue with what was going to happen, he should have at some point said like, hey, I can't do this. I can't do this with a clear conscience. I need to pull out. He signed a contract. He wrote the contract, most likely, you know, like obviously Alexander told him, I want to do this, this, and this, you know, but he made it like binding. But both parties signed it. He took the money.
I know there's the only person who would know is Alexander, and Alexander's dead. And he's gonna ruin these kids' worlds, so it's like he's keeping his respect, he's protecting the wishes of a dead person and screwing two great young people that we like. It's tough, I get it.
But he's creating a good season of television, so I'm not mad at him.
He's creating a great season of television. Yeah, I love the note and like some of the language on there, because for me, this is where it started to show off that it's going to get into some interesting geeky history, wine area-y aspects of the show that I love. Obviously as a wine nerd sommelier, I love the wine aspects. I loved his language of this being the ambrosia of the gods. I love the reference to Pliny the Elder. I think that's a name that a lot of people are familiar with, but they don't necessarily know what he has done. And I think a lot of people nowadays are probably familiar with it because of the double IPA that bears the name. Mm-hmm. But he was influential in Rome, and to a certain extent, he's kind of like the first wine critic. I mean, he was a critic of all alcohol, so like beer and wine, he was kind of a critic of. But I think that's an interesting tie-in with Alexander, who himself was a wine critic. And I'll be coming back to that kind of wine critic aspect, but I like that tie-in. His line of in vino veritas, in wine there's truth, is a line that a lot of people are familiar with, and like I like that little reference there. So I like the note. I like the tension around it. It was an interesting way to kind of bring back the stuff we liked about last season, but also do it in kind of a new and interesting way.
I am excited to see where like the first test was very much, you got to study, you got to learn, you're picking up things. I think with this test, it does feel more of sort of like a treasure hunt. So it gives me, just watching how Issei went through everything and was trying to deduce things, talking to the auctioneer, the lady, the Spanish winemakers. I liked that it feels almost like National Treasure. It's like,
yes.
I'm going to discover these clues and we're going to follow these trails. And I think that creates a fun dynamic. It lets you go to places. It lets you solve mysteries of this wine that you might not know. There's no label. Like there's all these interesting pieces to it. And, the lady even says that the one guy, I think it was her husband, that it was his treasure. Like this wine was a treasure.
Right.
So it feels
they're
so
leaning
much
into that language.
Yeah, so much more than just let's steal a smell, which was great.
Right.
Let's learn about these wines. Let's study these wines. It's more of like, I like, part of me feels like Treasure Island. There's this mystery wine. Even Alexander Leisure, the greatest wine connoisseur in the world, couldn't discover where this wine was from. Does it really come from somewhere? Does it exist? How are we going to find it? I think it's really set up some cool adventure that we get to go on.
It really has. And once again, it's similar to, but different from last season. Last season, I think the stakes were very well defined in terms of, this is the largest private wine collection in the entire world. So it's worth a ton of money, and it's got just some of the most amazing, rarest, most expensive bottles of wine in it. It's something that is really, really cool. Whereas this one is, what are they finding? They're finding knowledge. Like that's what they're going for. What is their reason for doing it? It's not because they want to get this, not because they want to get this kind of like accolade, but one of them maybe wants to escape the shadow of a father. The other one maybe needs to find meaning in life when he thought he had it and that kind of got taken away from him. Those are very personal stakes. They're not, they're not like the world is watching you as you're doing this wine test. And it feels, like you said, like an adventure, and even maybe like what they really gain from it ends up being so much more than just the knowledge of what this wine is, that there could be something greater there, but also kind of like an adventure, that there are dangers that they could never expect along the way. I love the promo image that they're using for this, because it looks like the Garden of Eden. It looks like the tree of knowledge, and they've got these vines instead of the tree, and there's a serpent on the vine right next to this bunch of grapes. So it's like the grapes maybe represent the apple, the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Is this forbidden knowledge? Is there a penalty for getting it or for trying to get to it? Is this something that they should have? I think there's some really interesting adventuring stuff that they can unlock here.
I like that. I do like that the first season, Drops of God, you clearly have this biblical reference, God as, he creates the wine, he drops the water to, grow the wine. And with Alexander Leisure being this like pinnacle figure, and then having these two children, in a weird way, Adam and Eve, to try to like go through this wine knowledge and this forbidden knowledge, that it could be very interesting. And I really hope they explore that in this season.
I do too. Let's chat about the two big people involved. Touched on them a little bit. It was great coming back. Let's start off with Camille here.
So happy for Camille. Engaged to Thomas, living on the vineyard with Thomas and Philippe. Love that they've upgraded and seem to be succeeding with their wine production. It seems like they've amped it up. They're doing the best. But I also feel really bad for her. And I think the scene where she's talking to the journalist was such a great way to introduce it, because the journalist in the beginning comes off very interested, very friendly with Camille and wanting to know, and almost in a way giving her accolades, and then switches it to just talking about Alexander Leisure. And I feel poor Camille is just going to be going through this pain of living in his shadow, just being like, you're not a revolutionary. He was the genius. And everything you do is just a glimpse of what he has already tried to do.
I really dislike that. That cut deep. And I felt like that journalist, and that could be people's perceptions. Obviously they're saying that that's the perception, is that Alexander was this genius, and the people underneath Alexander, they're just seeing that as extensions, like they learn from him, and that's why they're great. Not like they carry that spark themselves, but instead he like gave it to them. I disagree with that very strongly, because so this is where I wanted to kind of mention Pliny the Elder and the wine critic again, because I'm not trying to crap on wine or critics in general. They have, I think, a very important job. Things are expensive, whether it's movies, whether it's food, whether it's wine. There's a ton of it out there. And there's always that thing of like, I want to spend my money and be happy with what I get from that. And as somebody who doesn't get to do that very often, because I don't have an infinite supply of money, so I can't constantly buy wines, like the few times I do it, I want to get a good wine. And so we depend on critics as the arbiters of truth that tell us the good bottles from the bad bottles. They have an important job. I'm not trying to crap on critics. However, the people that make the product, they toil over that. That takes a lot of physical work. That takes a lot of mental creativity. It takes a lot of time. and you don't know what's going to come of it. And we saw in the last season how your world can get rocked with just like one bad review. You can have this small production thing and reviews can just bury a business. So you have one side, the people that are like the creative people that create things, whether it's movies, books, art. And then you have another group that kind of lords over them and says, this is good, this is bad, but Camille is doing something. She is creating something. Her father wanted to have an impact on the wine world, and he did it by picking and choosing who he thought was like raising the people he thought were good and trying to squash the people that he thought were bad, wielding his power like a weapon.
Yeah.
And Camille is leading through, through her actions. She's showing people that like, you can do this in a way that's positive to the earth and you can still make a great product. And it's tough. And I think that she may have had the money to build all this stuff, but if she can't, I don't think her wines are necessarily popular enough that she can run off of that forever. Because she did say to Philippe, like when the woman left, because she pissed her off and told her to go, that was going to hurt them. So I thought that was an interesting distinction. I disagree with that journalist. Camille is doing her own thing, and she is actually creating something, and that's something that Alexander never did.
Yeah, outside the ledger, I guess you could say he maybe created that, but it was a way for him to hold the control and say this is good wine, this is bad wine. He didn't actually produce wine. He wasn't, he didn't have a system. He just wanted people to study and learn wine as what he taught Issei. And so, I definitely see Camille trying to pave her own way. You could even make the argument though, like, she just took Philippe's already established vineyard and kind of retrofitted it with cool stuff because she has money now. But I think that she is on the right path. And I think, we are going to see her struggle throughout the season of her living in the shadow of Alexander Leisure. Like you can see how much it bothers her. Like she doesn't want to participate in this game. There's no stakes to the game, right? Just, can you figure out where this wine is? Has nothing to do with inheritance or challenges or tests. Can you figure out where it is? Very low stakes, and it just rubs her the wrong way. It's another connection to her dad, which she hates, and trying to get out of that shadow. And you see that she pours this wine that people are, praising as the best wine to exist. And even Tomas is like, I had to try it. I had to know it's exceptional. I can't believe it. And this wine has created this reinvigoration to Issei, and she just pours it down the drain like it's nothing. And and I think we talked about a little bit of friction that we're going to see.
Yes.
I think that action is going to come up again with them, and that's going to be probably the initial friction point for Camille and Issei.
Also, I think that they have very different goals in this. I think that Camille, she doesn't want to have anything to do with her dad. She doesn't want to be compared to her dad. Like if that's the game you're going to play, get out. I don't care if a bad article from you is going to hurt me. I'm not interested in dealing with him anymore. So she doesn't even want to be part of this competition. The only reason that she's doing it is to protect Issei, which is not what he wants. He doesn't want a babysitter. He doesn't want somebody that's going to, he is putting himself in some very dangerous situations. And I think that she is going to try to prevent him from doing some of this, which is the opposite of what he wants. Like he feels like there's something he needs to unlock. There's a secret that's like just outside of his reach, and that he has to do this thing in order to get to it. And so her coming along with him is actually, I think, going to be a little bit of a hindrance because, you know, instead of like trying to help him at times, she's going to try and like actively sabotage because she thinks that she's worried about him dying.
Yeah.
Which is fair. I get her side. I'm not trying to crap on what she's doing, but that's going to be one of the things that like drives the tension is like his drive is coming back. There's something just outside of his reach and he's not going to stop at anything to get to it, possibly even his own death.
Yeah.
That's not what she wants. She's trying to prevent that and there to help him. I mean, she'll gladly try and like convince him to stop doing this altogether, give up on the quest, you know, if it'll save his life. So I think that's where some of like that, that's going to come up.
Another thing that I think that can cause a little friction between them is that right now, Issei, he basically feels the way he does because Camille took it from him, right? She one-upped him. And in a way, him finding this location of this alcohol really felt like his quest, right? It was his mission. He got a vision from it. It was, you know, she's already getting visions. He already has to live in the shadow of her visions. And he just wants to be able to have visions like her. So that's ultimately why he's trying to do this diving, to see these visions, to like hopefully get a better understanding or knowledge of what he wants to do or his path. And then he finally is like, okay, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to go find this wine. This is my goal, my mission. And then imagine then, you know, he's fine. Camille, you don't have to do it. I have to do this. This is my thing. And then her coming in and being like, let me help you. I feel like there's a bit of the wound to the ego that he could take from that, where it's, I had this mission to do with this. This was feeling my purpose. And now here's this person that one-upped me and made me lose everything. And potentially her help in this could make him lose this newfound motivation to like find his purpose again. So I could see just her, like, I get the sentiment. It's great. You know, she's like, we're brother and sister. We can do it together. And I love that. But also I do feel she could hurt him.
She's she's not listening to him and she's not taking him seriously. You know, he's saying, I had a vision. It was real and it's important. And she's like, no, like that's not how my thing works. Instead of saying like, oh, let's talk more about it, she kind of brushes him off. So she's not being a partner. She's being more of like a motherly figure than she is being somebody that is really there to support him for what he wants. Right. You know, she's there to like grab his hand before he runs out into the street. No, you can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do. And, you know, I do see where Camille's coming from. You know, I don't think, you know, she's bad. She wants to protect her brother. She also wants everything with her father to be gone. And this is hit in a way, you know, having this relationship with her brother, who is still jumping at the whims of her father, you know, that also probably doesn't feel great for her, where she's like, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want anything to do with this. Like, these are all just mind games. And honestly, it could have been way worse for us had we not been very mature about how we handled the end part. And so like, I see her side of it, where she, you know, knows what her father can do and the manipulation he can play. And is this something that is just manipulating Issei? And so she wants to protect him from that. But I feel like he needs the journey. He has to go on.
Yeah. I also think that at some point, I think far down in the series, I see, like in the season, I think that she is going to have one of these visions. And that'll finally get her to understand why this is so important to him, because the two of them are, even though they are so different, and I think we definitely saw that with that introduction, but I think that's more of like a French versus Japanese. The Japanese are very like understated, and the French come in all loud and like tight embraces, and you can see like Hirokazu kind of like tense up a little bit with that. He's not used to the sound. He's not used to being like grabbed like that. But those are just like cultural things between them. When you look at the deeper things, somehow they both got each other the same gift. Like they have the same wavelengths. And Issei thought that her being able to see things was this superpower. And at the end of the last season, he saw one of those fruits. He like just started to tap into it. So they have this connection. And I think that will potentially come back, and she'll have that thing, and then she'll kind of understand. I'm curious how you feel about his free diving and or his visions and like what he saw.
So I think the free diving is cool. I think it's a very cool. It was a great way to start the episode. I feel it was ominous. There's just it in the beginning. It's very dark. It was very like almost at night, very somber, very just like cut to the chase of what's happening, and then he goes down to dive and he's alone. And I think that it was a great symbol of what he is going through. And he mentions the darkness, and I feel like there is this darkness that is kind of clouded his mindset, and him trying to find a way out of that. And even though the dark is scary and there's an unknown aspect to it, he still meets that challenge. He still is like, I'm going to see this. I want to see this. I'm trying to find my place in this world. Like I thought I had my place in this world, and it was just ripped out from under me. So I like that he's got this new diving thing it feels very him. It's very important to his character. Now that vision of what he saw, which was the moon, right? He just saw the moon?
Yeah. I mean, he straight up said the first time he saw the vision, and they didn't talk about it right away, but they talked about it afterwards when they're in the cellar next to the pools that cool the wind. He said, I saw the Sea of Tranquility. And that's where the Apollo astronauts landed on the moon. So that's what he was talking about. It wasn't just the moon, but a specific part of the moon, the Sea of Tranquility. And when you see the zoomed in, when he goes into the cave with the woman, it's 17 meters deep. And so it's super zoomed in, and you can only see less than a quarter of the moon.
Yeah.
The Sea of Tranquility was one of the parts that you could see.
Interesting. Because I feel when he said the Sea of Tranquility, I didn't even think about the moon, because there was also another shot I thought it showed of him just out in the water by himself.
Yes.
And so that's what I took as the Sea of Tranquility. He had just found a water where he could just kind of be free and just get all of his thoughts together. And so, I didn't think about that as being the moon. And so what connection do you think the moon has?
I mean, there's different things that can go. So first of all, there is a science fiction book called The Sea of Tranquility. So it could also be a double entendre with that, where it's related to that book. But it could also have to do with the fact that the Sea of Tranquility is made of basalt, which is igneous rock. Igneous rock is lava that hardened. And so maybe this points to a wine region that has that, igneous rock, because the the soil has a big impact on what grows.
Right.
So that could be an indicator of where to look. I have no clue, but I definitely think that it was very clever because there's a lot of people that aren't going to know what the Sea of Tranquility is. And that first shot, when he gets pulled under, you know, when he has that vision, he gets pulled under, it's a very wide shot. And so you see him in what looks like a sea. So it could easily be like, that's the Sea of Tranquility. And the moon is there, but it's small. You know, it's in the background. It's not like it zoomed in on it to let you know that it was important.
Right.
And so you could think that the importance there is like the sea he is in. I thought that was a very clever thing. And honestly, when I saw the cave the first time with the moon, it was so odd that I was like, I think that looks like the moon, but also I can't tell. Is it just like a funky coral that's being lit a funky way?
I thought the same thing. Is that a jellyfish? What am I looking at here? It like took me a minute, and that's why I was like, it was the moon, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. I was very off put by it, and am I looking at a reflection from the surface? It was very hard to fully understand. And then I think by the end of it, like it lingers on it enough. You're like, nope, that's just the moon in the water. Like he saw the moon.
That's his vision. I love how this show does like these genre bending aspects, or it does, in this case, these breathtaking visuals that help explain abstract concepts. Like, you know, the idea last season of a memory palace. They showed that abstract idea in such a cool, what looked like a real world way of what that would look like. And I think that this was, you know, a physical representation of that abstract idea of before he passes out and he starts to see that vision. That is literally what he saw is the moon in the cave, and possibly specifically the Sea of Tranquility. You know, so I don't know, like, another thing is like, maybe it has to do with, you know, Apollo astronauts, like those were explorers. So maybe it's like part of that exploration, like telling him to go on the quest or taking those first steps.
Right.
I don't know. I'm really excited to see more about that.
Okay. With all of these visions that we're seeing, you know, they didn't really focus on it too much when in the first season. They did, like, we saw them, but they didn't like flat out say like, oh, these visions, they're like kind of a supernaturally aspect to it. And now we see Issei going all in on Vision Quest. And I'm curious, do you think that this is a way for the show to kind of dip its feet into a little bit more like what the manga is like, where it's a little bit more out there, potentially a little bit more supernaturally, potentially?
I don't know. So I only read the first volume. That's all that was available at the libraries around me. And there's nothing supernatural in the first volume of the manga. So I don't know if they later go into anything like that. It is a little bit more unrealistic and a little bit more kind of dialed up. I think Apple did some smart moves in making it a little bit more realistic. I don't know if lovers, people that read the manga first, whether or not they will appreciate the like major changes. Like there is no, the main character that we would think of as Camille is a male, which that's fine. It's not just like a gender bend thing. It's a complete change of it. Like they're it's kind of like a mix of the two, of like Camille and Issei. Like they have a job similar to like the business Issei is trying to grow, but they're more like Camille in some ways. So they took some pretty big liberties to it. I can't tell if they're trying to give validity to, adding some of these supernatural elements, or if this ties back into, we did find out that that Alexander Leger had turned to Buddhism later in his life. And so I don't know if this is giving some credence to some of the beliefs that are there within Buddhism or not. I'm intrigued, and I definitely want to see where this goes.
I am too. One last funny thing that I wanted to mention is so there is very clear language barriers. I love that the show does Japanese,
yes,
French. We had a little bit of Spanish, and of course English. And I think that, one thing that we've noticed is that if Camille and Issei are talking to each other, they speak in English. That's like their common language is English. And there is a moment when Issei is going to meet the old lady to talk about the wine. And it's so funny because in the beginning, as he's walking down with the caretaker guy is just speaking in French the whole time. And he's, she's a delight, people don't come around to see her anymore. It might take a while. Like he's kind of like prefacing him, like what he's going to experience, like meeting this girl. And at first I was like, maybe it's been long enough that he's learned French and it's not a big deal. But in previous scenes, we had seen it be said that, or anytime they've talked, it's been in English to communicate. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until he gets to the lady and he's like, do you speak English? Like, I don't speak French. And I think about that whole scene of this guy just giving him all this like preamble to meeting this old lady. He was just saying, this is what you should expect. Takes a minute. And so in that whole time, he's just not listening and he's just going in blind. I'm going to just try to talk to this lady no matter what.
Well, that's like poor Issei's dad when they show up at the Chassangre Estate. Mm-hmm. And Camille's mom is just talking a mile a minute to him. She seems like she's got a little bit of like the hots for him, And Camille even says like he doesn't understand what you're saying, and she just like keeps going on. She even like directly asks him a question. She's like, oh, it's been like this many years or something like that, and like.
It's so funny. I think there's some cool things that we can see with these languages, and I loved it from the first season. And I'm excited to see more diverse areas. Maybe we go to Italy or even potentially America, but I don't know. But we'll see.
Yeah, I love it. Something that I thought was funny for a very different reason. Was when they first taste the wine. So that, I want to make it clear, the show does a good job of capturing the feel of wine. And I think that there are some things that it is very accurate with. And then there are some things that it takes some liberties with in order to make some damn good drama, and it definitely takes some liberties. But I think the one that I thought was a little bit the silliest was like they taste the wine and they're like, this is like nothing I've ever tasted. I have no clue what it is, but I know it's a single variety. How do you know that? There is nothing. The way that you can tell that a wine is a single variety or a blend is you identify the one grape characteristic, like, oh, this has the following 7 things that make me know it's a cab, Or the way that it's a blend is you taste characteristics of Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre, like this common blend that they do in Rhone and other areas. They may be other grapes, but like you recognize the characteristics of specific multiple grapes. But there is absolutely no one indicator that all single variety wines have that blends don't have. So there's no way of saying like, I have no clue what this wine is, but the one thing I know is it's a single variety.
I have no idea what it is. I just know that it's seagull. Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
As a layman over here, I didn't even pick up on that, so...
But you know what? The show gets like the feel of wine right. I love... Well, like one of the things I really like is like how, wine evoked this this vision from Issei, right? That's what he's been chasing down. And I think potentially when he first passed out on that 50 meter, I don't think he got a vision there.
No, I don't think so.
I think he's been trying, and the wine unlocked it. Like, and I do think that's one of the things that, like, wine is very much like art. It's subjective. It's all different. We all get to put our personal spin on it. That's why I like what Camille is doing, because like she's creating something. She's making choices. And when you drink that, you then get to, as the person consuming it, you get to put your own thoughts on it and be like, this makes me think of this. And it oftentimes, especially since it's alcohol and gets us a little goofy, can help like evoke things in us, whether it's like memories, or ideas or conversations or good times. And I feel like this kind of captured that evocative aspect of wine, which is once again a very abstract concept and cool to kind of show that.
Yeah. I mean, I love the vibe that it gives with wine, and, just seeing how they've tasted, how they inspected it. When I lived with you way back when, and we went through a little bit of wine stuff and did a little bit of tasting and smells. And, I picked up a little bit of like how they look at the wine and clear, and them doing it at night, bringing out their flashlights so they can see the right color that the wine is. It makes it feel like, again, the detectives, they're going on an adventure trying to figure out this wine.
Yes. I love it. I'm excited.
Love it. Me too.
If you enjoyed our breakdown of episode 1, then we think you'll like this video where I go through wine scenes in Drops of God to explain what they got right and what they got wrong. Thanks for watching.